of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
We are Newsroom. Hello and welcome once again from Johannesburg here in South Africa. My name, of course, Evan Jansen. The show is always live and broadcast from our studios right here in Auckland Park, Johannesburg. Don't forget, between 9 and 12 every weekday morning, we also stream live on YouTube, so you can watch us on that facility anywhere in the world. Of course, South Africa is in the grips or in the midst of another match-fixing, football match-fixing blowout. It seems the former SAFA CEO, Leslie Sidibe, seems to be caught in the crosshairs at the moment. We ask the question of the day: what do you make of the latest match-fixing scandal here in South Africa? Of course, lots of different views on it. We'll talk about it throughout the show today, but we'd love to have your interaction on the latest match-fixing scandal. It doesn't seem to want to go away at all here in South African football. Anyhow, let's go to Elvis for the morning update.
Thank you, Eben. Let's take it right from the top. The situation in the Mandela informal settlement at Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand remains tense but calm following weekend's chaos. The 60th Commission on the Status of Women is underway in New York under the theme Women's Empowerment and the Link to Sustainable Development. And key U.S. states will vote today in the U.S. elections in Super Tuesday in the primaries there. Now, those are all your headlines, but before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Elvis, a good morning to you too. It's been a very interesting morning so far. In fact, an interesting overnight as we all look at what's been happening in FIFA. Even I believe that a lot more needs to be said about this particular topic.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion that's going to go on. It's interesting what the latest developments are. There's a lot of threats and counter threats about spilling the beans, being right in the media right now. We'll see how this thing develops over the next couple of days, but we would like our viewers to interact with this question today. But before we get there, give us the headlines.
All right, thank you very much, Evan. This is what's coming up in sports today. Good morning to you.
The support only came in October of 2010 in the form of $10 million US.
Former SAFA CEO Leslie Sidibe threatens to spill the beans on the $10 million US after he gets a 5-year ban from FIFA.
To very successful commercial companies.
And WADA says that sponsors and broadcasters should help fund the fight against doping. All this as India and New Zealand prepare for their opening World T20 match in Nagpur this afternoon. And you can always interact with our question of the day today, and we'll be looking out for your answers as well as your thoughts on at SABC Newsroom. Back to you, Elvis.
So, question that we asked the viewers today, Kendall, is what do they make of this latest match-fixing scandal? Because it is a scandal, and even if you look at 10 million beans to be spilled, that's a lot of beans.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about this $10 million bribe that was paid. It's never been placed in South Africa during this entire time. It was let's call it a fee that was paid to Jack Warner and the Confederation of the Americas. Unfortunately, it seems there's a lot more to the story than meets the eye. But let's hope that it comes out and that we can put this behind us.
And we're going to break this open a little bit later in the weekend to talk more about this issue, isn't it?
You can so count on it. Match-fixing, doping, that's definitely going to be focusing on this week as well as next week in a special program. But more about all of that a little later.
Now, that's all coming up later with Kendall in his sports section as well. So you have to stay tuned. Your channel of choice, channel 404. This is Newsroom. Top story this hour. The situation in Mandela informal settlement at Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand remains tense but calm. Chaos broke out on Saturday following the killing of a local man, allegedly by a Somali shopkeeper. Among the injured is a 14-year-old Bongani Msimango, who is fighting for his life after he was hit by a stray bullet.
Picking up the pieces. Shopkeepers at Mandela Informal Settlement are trying to get their businesses off the ground after this weekend's violence. This Ethiopian shopkeeper says he's tired of suffering for others' mistakes.
You must do it there, make a plan for Somalian people. You do it there or wrong every time.
Just down the road, locals equally affected. This woman's property was damaged by looters.
I built these rooms to make extra income, so these shopkeepers only came to rent. Now the looters destroyed everything. What will my children eat?
Some residents aren't happy that the businesses remain closed.
We lack nothing, but today, kids went to school empty-handed. We are asking the community to stop.
Some of the injured bystanders are not doing so well.
When I called to inquire about his health, they said he was critical.
Residents say all they want is peace.
Let them go back home because they are not peaceful. They will finish us.
Police are maintaining a strong presence. There have been sporadic clashes between locals and foreign shop owners in the recent past. Matlako Komane, SABC News, Katlehong, Ekurhuleni.
Speaker of Parliament Baleka Mbete says land allocation and a de-racialized economy remain central to tackling the challenges of inequality in the country. Mbete was addressing the South African Human Rights Commission 20-year anniversary conference in Midrand.
The Commission's second decade of existence comes at a time when the country has been rocked by racial turmoil. National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete says while the scourge of racism is a global problem, institutions like the Human Rights Commission have a critical role to play in calming simmering racial tensions.
Our history and the experiences of other countries show that unity and social cohesion are necessary to meet social and economic objectives.
Mbete says accelerating land reform is the only sustainable solution.
We must insist that our economic growth path de-racializes the economy and makes a fundamental break with ownership patterns of the past. This must also include the acceleration of the allocation of land.
Government has also praised the Commission for its sterling work in defense of ordinary people's human rights.
In addition to the South African Human Rights Commission, we have the Equality Court that serves as a mechanism in which disputes relating to violation of these rights can be ventilated, whilst the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development provides administrative support.
Former President Thabo Mbeki is billed to address the conference's final day on Tuesday. Dumala Mohlaudi, SABC News, Midrand.
Now that's your news for now. To find out more about today's theme, we're talking about rapid urbanization today, as well as buildings or the construction boom, the per se construction boom in South Africa. We'll find out more. Yevon, that's next.
Yeah, thank you very much, Elvis. That's our theme today, rapid urbanization. We're looking at both positives and negatives now. I can tell you, according to one of the latest United Nations Habitat reports, Johannesburg and Cape Town are two of the fastest growing cities in the world. Now, the demand for infrastructure on the continent, the African continent, is driven by rising populations and rapid urbanization, and is causing a shift for all players in the sector. Statistics South Africa estimates that by the year 2030, Gauteng will be home to around 18 million people. Although this outlook has a positive impact on the economy, it also poses a threat to the existing population. Now, to talk to us on this matter, we are joined by the City of Johannesburg's spokesperson or Communication Deputy Director, Ntantise Modingwane. A very good morning to you, sir. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Eben, and thanks for the opportunity.
Now, I look at the numbers. I love to look at the numbers. That's kind of my job. In the last 15 years, we've seen 5 million people move into the city of Johannesburg, and that trend is going to continue pretty much for the next 15 years. How do you manage this very high pace of urbanization in a city like Joburg?
Let me start by giving you a background and an outcome of a study that we've done in terms of movement of people in Johannesburg. The estimate really currently is we receiving more than 10,000 people a month coming to Johannesburg, maybe for opportunities and so forth. So as a city, we have to plan accordingly and plan to be able to accommodate those numbers. One of the things that we are working on, that the mayor announced in 2013, is what we call the Corridors of Freedom. The Corridors of Freedom are a development, infrastructure development program that looks at making sure that we increase the densities, because currently, as we speak, the densities in Johannesburg are not in the level of the other cities in the world. You find that people stay in peripheries, far away from places of work, on the outskirts of the city. And what does that do to the poor of the poor? They spend more of their money on food and transport. Going to work. So the approach of the corridors is really to say, instead of going the old route of one person, one stand, maybe 1 point something hectares of stand, why don't we look at those portions of land and go higher in terms of high-rise building? But what we're doing now, we've just rolled out extensive infrastructure to be able to cope with those pressures, the pressures of more people coming into our cities.
What are the threats? What are the negatives of this? We see it in Cape Town as well, and here we see pictures of the building work. Both cities kind of look like building sites. And if you can kind of give us the threats, sort of on the population side, are there increased risks of communities being at odds with each other? We see xenophobic attacks and all that sort of. Is this part of the urbanization process that you have to manage?
Now, from the city of Johannesburg, we take it from the side of positives. Although there might be challenges in terms of making sure that you have enough resources in terms of budget to be able to cater for increasing number of people. But we also view some of the people that are coming into the city being people who are bringing new skills. One of the challenges in Johannesburg is a huge unemployment, especially among young people. What we want to encourage is partnerships with people that have different skills from other countries, from other provinces, to come through and be able to work with people of Johannesburg and be able to stimulate this economy. Because one of the programs that we rolled out as the City of Johannesburg is what we call Josie at Work, where we're saying we do not believe that the current way of delivering services where government comes into your community, deliver service and leave is sustainable. But we want to partner with communities in those areas so that they work on the service delivery aspect on behalf of the municipality, and the municipality will be compensating them. That way we create smaller businesses and co-ops that are community-based.
Johannesburg in the year 2030, what will that city look like?
The Joburg 2040 strategy that was adopted by Council in 2011 says we're looking at a city that would be vibrant, a city that would be safe, a city that would encourage high density, and a city that would have all the amenities that the community require closer to them. So along these corridors that I spoke about, we're building amenities such as clinics, schools, parks, so that people can live as communities. And one of the things that we also rolling out is this thing of making sure that we re-engineer the way the hostels were designed. Because if a hostel is sitting in a particular area, it looks isolated. It's not part of that community. So we're building family units so that people can be integrated, and we're moving people around so that it's not only the traditional people that were in hostels, but people from townships as well can own a flat in a previously hostel designed area, so that communities don't look at themselves in a tribalistic way or in any other way, but they look themselves as communities that are residing in a particular area.
Integrated communities you're talking about. It's a great vision that you have, but achieving it will be quite difficult. How do you bridge this gap between communities that we seem to have right now?
The most important thing from our side is to engage the communities at all times. When we drafted the Joburg 2040 strategy, it was an extensive public consultation exercise. And one of the things, the outcome of the GDS 2040 is that we have to have what we call engaged citizenry. So for every development, every intervention that goes into a particular communities are brought along. We talk to them, we explain the rationale, we explain the vision, the future, and then the communities that we've engaged with seem to be adopting this approach that says we are all people of Johannesburg, and together we can be able to make a greater city.
Well, thank you for joining us. And Ntantise Moringwane is the Deputy Director of Communication here for the City of Johannesburg. Yes, the City of Johannesburg and Cape Town are two of the fastest growing in the world. We're dealing with rapid urbanization here. Let's go to Elvis. He's got more.
Thank you, Evan. Now, according to the United Nations projections for the period between 2015 and 2030, Johannesburg's population will grow from 9.3 million to 11.5 million. In 2013, there were 6.5 million vehicles alone on Gauteng's roads, and that number is increasing fast. Now, Gauteng Premier David Makura spoke at a three-day international conference on the concept of a transport authority for the Gauteng city region last week, and says that the introduction of a transport authority in the province will enable the integration of all modes of public transport. Now, to tell us more, we are joined in studio by the Gauteng MEC for Roads and Transport, Mr. Ismail Vardi. MEC, a very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, Elvis.
Now, we heard about the concept of an integrated or a single transport authority. Talk to me about that concept. How will it operate?
I think what we have currently is the Gauteng Department of Roads and Transport is responsible for 34 bus contracts all over Gauteng. And then if you take each of our metropolitan municipalities, they have their own bus companies and they have the bus rapid transit systems that they are rolling out. So Via Vaya, Arieng and Harambee. Parallel to that, we have the Gautrain system, which is run by the provincial government, and then you have Metro Rail run by PRASA. If you just take a snapshot of it, this is a highly fragmented system. It's compartmentalized and there's very little integration. And I think if we want to build a Gauteng city region, which is being rapidly urbanized, high levels of in-migration, increase in our population, we've got to find a way of integrating the system, getting greater efficiency in the system so that there's seamless mobility from one point to the other.
Because it would seem that these departments would obviously work in silos and there will be no integration at this point in time. So this is what the authority is all about, to integrate all of them.
Well, that's the idea. The idea of the authority is to create some kind of an overarching structure jointly with the municipalities, not centralizing power at the provincial level, but working in collaboration, in cooperation with the municipalities so that we can get a better organized transport system, a more efficient, more reliable, safer and cost-effective for our people.
There was one authority that was not mentioned in that sentence, and that was the taxi owners, which for years felt that they were a little bit, sort of left aside. Will they be integrated in this entire process?
The three-day conference we had last week, I mean, we had speakers from 14 countries in the world, and each one of them stressed one thing. You can't have an effective and functioning transport authority without the involvement of the private sector. And in this particular instance, we're really looking at bus companies and the taxi industry. their advice over and over again was that, look, integrate, involve these people from the beginning so that there's wider support for the idea of a transport authority.
MEC, I'm going to ask you to hold on for a second, because right now we're going to cross to Midrand here in Gauteng, where the former President Thabo Mbeki is about to address the South African Human Rights Commission 20-year anniversary conference. Let's go there live.
I want to say until he was chased away. But Advocate Mushwana, esteemed members of the Commission and distinguished participants, this podium is very small. The SABC people, do you mind if I put papers on top of your mic? Will it do any harm? Yes. It will do harm. So we must remove the mic. No, it's okay. As we are trying to accommodate you in a way that it's chips will fall. Yeah, that will be fine. There you are. No, thanks. Well, the fact that we meet here today to discuss, among others, the issue of racism and therefore national reconciliation and nation building constitutes a justifiable acknowledgement that we have still not accomplished the objective stated in our Constitution of building a new South Africa based on the values of non-racialism and non-sexism. And we make this acknowledgement not to deny the sustained efforts that have made and the progress achieved during the last 22 years of our democracy. However, it would seem to me that over the years, certainly in our public discourse, we have spoken less and less about the effect of the racist legacy, whose eradication must surely constitute the heart and the focal point of the struggle to create a non-racial society visualized in our Constitution. Indeed, I'm persuaded to the view that it was not the tenacity of the racist legacy in terms of our country's socio-economic structure which has brought the matter forcefully back into the public discourse that was still confronted by the scourge of racism. And rather, this was prompted by the recent extremely reprehensible comments by one Penny Sparrow about Africans being monkeys, whom she said, referring to the Durban beaches, brought huge debt and troubles and discomfort to others, and said, from now I shall address the blacks of South Africa as monkeys. And nevertheless, you should draw attention to the important distinction we should make between the separate but interconnected elements of what might be characterized as subjective and material racism, and the dialectical relationship between the two. In this context, I'm certain that all of us will have taken the trouble to remind ourselves of both our 2000 National Conference on Racism and the 2001 United Nations Third World Conference Against Racism, Racial Discrimination, Xenophobia, and Related Intolerance, which was held in Durban. Like our own conference, in its declaration, the UN conference drew attention to what it described as, quote, the persistence of racist attitudes and practices, unquote, and the direct relationship between these attitudes and practices to poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, social exclusion, and economic disparities, unquote. And later I will comment on what we might have to do to combat these two interconnected expressions of racism, the subjective and the material. For now, I must confess that as I tried to re-examine what democratic South Africa has done over the years to combat racism, I looked at various comments I had made during this period. There are many things I said, not different from many others in our country, which I believe bear repeating, both because I believe that they remain relevant and because they emphasize the point that as we meet here today, we should draw lessons from our past and work to build on what has been achieved in the continuing struggle against racism. You will therefore pardon me as I cite some of my various statements, which will also impose an obligation on the conference to assess whether these are of any relevance in terms of our continuing and current challenge to defeat racism. Many among us will recall that our National Assembly held a debate on reconciliation and nation building on the 29th of May 1998. During that debate, I said in part, and will quote my statement at some length, because of my conviction about its continuing relevance. I said then that the 1993 Constitution of the Republic of South Africa ends with an epilogue entitled National Unity and Reconciliation. And among other things, it says that this Constitution provides a historic bridge between the past and a deeply divided society, characterized by strife, by conflict, untold suffering and injustice, and a future founded on the recognition of human rights, democracy, and peaceful coexistence and development opportunities for all South Africans, irrespective of color, of race, of class, of belief, or sex. In the pursuit of national unity, it continues, the well-being of all South African citizens and peace require reconciliation between the people of South Africa and the reconstruction of society. For its part, the 1996 Constitution of the Republic as a preamble which, among other things, says, as all of us know, that we, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of the past and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. We therefore adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic so as to heal the divisions of the past and to improve the quality of life of all citizens and free the potential of each person. And in its founding provisions, the Constitution also says that our Republic has one of its values commitment to promote non-racialism and non-sexism. I said then that I believe that as we discuss the issue of national unity and reconciliation, we'll have to do a number of things. The first of these, to which I'm certain we will all respond in the same manner, is that we should commit ourselves to the pursuit of the objectives contained in these constitutions for a democratic South Africa. The second is that we'll have to answer the question honestly as to whether we are making the requisite process, that we as a country, as a nation, we're making the requisite process to create a non-racial society, to build a non-sexist society, to heal the divisions of the past, to achieve the peaceful coexistence of all our people, to create development opportunities for all South Africans, irrespective of color, of race, of class, of belief, or sex, and to improve the quality of life of citizens. And thirdly, we'll have to answer the question again as honestly as we can as to whether our actions have been and are based on the recognition of the injustices of the past, and whether our actions have genuinely sought to promote the integrated constitutional objectives of national unity, of the well-being of all South Africans, of peace, of reconciliation among the people of South Africa, and the reconstruction of society. And in the light of the prescriptions contained in the two constitutions which I have referred, let me declare some matters to which many of us are committed. We are interested that as a people, we move as rapidly and as consistently as possible to transform South Africa into a non-racial country. We are interested that our country lives up to its constitutional commitment to transform itself into a non-sexist society. We are interested that together as South Africans, we adopt the necessary steps that will eradicate poverty in our country as quickly as possible and in all its manifestations, to end the dehumanization of millions of our people, which inevitably results from the terrible deprivation to which so many, both black and white, are victims. And we're interested that we must deal with our political past honestly, frankly, and without equivocation, so that the purposes for which most of us agreed to establish the TRC are achieved. And we're interested that our country responds to the call to a new patriotism, as a result of which we can all agree to a common national agenda, which would include a common fight to eradicate the legacy of apartheid, a united offensive against corruption and crime, concerted action to advance the interests of those least capable to defend themselves, including children, women, the disabled, and the elderly, an agreement about how we should protect and advance the interests of all of the different cultural, language, and religious groups that make up the South African population, a commitment to confront the economic challenges facing our country in a manner that simultaneously addresses issues of high and sustained growth and raising the living standards of especially the black poor. An all-embracing effort to build a sense of common nationhood and a shared destiny, as a result of which we can entrench in the minds of all our people the understanding that however varied their skin complexions, cultures, and life conditions, the success of each nevertheless depends on the effort the other will make to turn into reality the precept that each is his or her brother's or sister's keeper, and that indeed we should share a united view of our country's relations with the rest of the world. And we believe that these are the issues we must address when we speak of reconciliation and nation building. They stand at the center of the very future of South Africa as the home of a stable democracy, of human rights, of equality, of peace, of stability, and a shared prosperity. And accordingly, we must attend to the question whether, with regard to all of these issues, and at all times, all of us behave in a manner which promotes the achievement of the goals we have mentioned, and therefore take us forward towards the realization of the objective of reconciliation and nation building, without which the kind of South Africa visualized in our Constitution will most certainly not come into being. So must we also pose the questions: what is nation building, and is it happening? With regard to the first of these, our own response would be that nation building is a construction of the reality and the sense of common nationhood, which would result from the abolition of disparities in the quality of life among South Africans, based on the racial, gender, and geographic inequalities we all inherited from the past. The second question we posed is, are we making the requisite progress towards achieving the objective of nation building as we have just defined it? If we elect, I said then, if we elected to answer this question in a polite and reassuring manner, we would answer yes, we are making the requisite progress. However, I believe that perhaps we should answer this question honestly and deal with the consequences of an honest response, however discomforting it may be. Accordingly, I think our answer to the question whether we're making the requisite progress towards achieving the objective of nation building as we defined it would be no. A major component part of the issue of reconciliation and nation building is defined and derives from the material conditions in our society, which have divided our country into two nations, one black and the other white. We therefore make bold, this is what I said then, to say that South Africa is a country of two nations. And one of these nations is white, relatively prosperous, regardless of gender or geographic dispersal. It has ready access to a developed economic, physical, educational, communication, and other infrastructure. This enables it to argue that except for the persistence of gender discrimination against women, all members of this nation have the possibility to exercise their right to equal opportunity in the development opportunities to which the Constitution of 1993 committed our country. The second and larger nation of South Africa is black and poor, with the worst affected being women in the rural areas, the black rural population in general, and the people with disabilities. And this nation lives under conditions of a grossly underdeveloped economic, physical, educational, communication, and other infrastructure. It has virtually no possibility to exercise what in reality amounts to a theoretical right to equal opportunity, with that right being equal within this black nation only to the extent that it is equally incapable of realization. And this reality of two nations, underwritten by the perpetuation of the racial, gender, and spatial disparities born of a very long period of colonial and apartheid white minority domination, constitutes a material base which reinforces the notion that indeed we are not one nation, but two nations, and that neither are we becoming one nation. Consequently, also, the objective of national reconciliation is not being achieved. This follows as well that the longer this situation persists, in spite of the gift of hope delivered to the people by the birth of democracy, the more entrenched will be the conviction that the concept of nation building is a mere mirage and that no basis exists or will ever exist to enable national reconciliation to take place. That's what I said in 1998. In 2002, one of our politicians said my statement that South Africa was made up of two nations was, I quote, a mischaracterization of the South African condition made for entirely self-serving reasons, and that the ANC figures that the best way to retain the support of black South Africans is to turn other South Africans into the enemy, unquote. It may very well be that some among the distinguished participants at this conference agree with this statement. I would humbly suggest that they should freely express their views in this regard without any fear. As all of us would agree, this is important because it is only when we correctly define the problem and challenge that we face that we'll be able to elaborate the proper responses and solutions. And we can only achieve such correct definition and therefore the right solutions through an open debate which allows for the expression of different and contending opinions. In this context, I'll take the liberty to quote an important observation made by the chairperson of our Human Rights Commission in 2000, Professor Panipichana, in his preface to the report of our National Conference on Racism, which was published in 2001. In reality, Professor Pichana's observation is about how our past, defined exactly by the fact of two racially defined nations, even leads to differences among us with regard to our perceptions of what our objective actuality is. And to put the matter crudely, whether the cat that crossed the road was black or it was white. And Professor Pichana wrote that reconciliation in South Africa is a big challenge. It is often bedeviled by confrontational politics. It has to transcend the hurdles erected by our past and the legacy of that past which lives with us today. More seriously, he said it is made all the more difficult by a predilection to denial and skewed understanding of democracy and liberalism, an acutely South African brand of conservative liberalism. This suggests also that the past does not matter. We must simply look to the future. It is also part of this conservativeness which claims that not much needs to be done today to remedy the effects of the past, and that transformation is a threat to equality. When such notions persist, he said, it is difficult to believe that we understand each other when we talk about change. And the values enunciated by the Constitution cease to have any meaning. The result is cynicism about our national efforts. It leads to indifference about the specter of racism in our country, unquote. It may very well be that correctly to assess our current national reality, we would have to moderate the view about those who have ready access to a developed economic, physical, educational, communication, and other infrastructure, specifically to include among these the black middle class, so-called, which has emerged as a result of the sustained effort during the last 2 decades to eradicate the legacy of racism. Obviously, this draws attention to the class as against and in addition to the racial divisions. Nevertheless, the question still remains whether such progress as we have made in the effort to eradicate the legacy of racism has effectively eroded the racial fault lines we inherited from our past, and whether this has now resulted in giving primacy to the class rather than the national contradiction. To respond to the question concerning the fundamental restructuring of our society, giving birth to a new South Africa which in its socio-economic profile is essentially different from the one we inherited in 1994, I believe that even for reasons of methodology, it would assist us if we try honestly to answer the various and many questions I posed in 1998 as contained in the extract I've cited. In the end, our common challenge is to answer the 2 interconnected questions. What must we do to combat subjective racism, the attitudes, the prejudices, and ideologies which constitute the noxious notion of racial superiority, which result in discriminatory, oppressive, and insulting practices? And secondly, what must we do to combat material racism, the actual phenomenon of racially defined poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, social exclusion, and economic disparities? Earlier, I referred to the racist comments made by Penny Sparrow about black monkeys only 3 months ago to illustrate the subjective racism which still clearly constitutes the mindset of some of our citizens. 15 years earlier, I drew attention to this very same phenomenon in my State of the Nation address in 2000, during which I reported that as government we had requested the Human Rights Commission, this Human Rights Commission, to convene the National Conference on Racism, which did indeed take place. The racist comment I quoted then was even more offensive than the one made by Penny Sparrow. I quote it again today to highlight the challenge we face, strongly to confront subjective racism in our society, which I'm convinced some only express in private, which communicates a false impression that we have fewer racists, black and white, than actually populate our society. During the 2000 State of the Nation address, I quoted a comment which had been made by an engineer who was working in one of our companies, and which comment had been unearthed by FAO, the Food and Agricultural, and the Allied Workers Union. And the engineer wrote, and I quote, "I would like to summarize what the Kaffirs have done to stuff up this country since they came into power. If a white buys a house, he pays transfer duties. If a Kaffir buys a house, it is free of duties because he was previously disadvantaged. More than 20% of the GDP is embezzled by the Kaffir politicians and corrupt civil servants. The unemployment insurance fund and state pension funds have been embezzled. Our girlfriends and wives are in constant threat of being brutally raped by some AIDS-infested Kaffir or gang of Kaffirs. Every day, someone you know is either robbed, assaulted, hijacked, or murdered. Half these black bastards have bought their driver's licenses from corrupt traffic cops. And all I'm saying is that AIDS is not working fast enough," unquote. And contrary to the response of some of our politicians then, that my quotation of these vile comments amounted to nothing more than what was regularly denounced by these politicians as playing the race card. The remarks made by Ms. Sparrow 15 years later, supported by others, confirmed the persistence of subjective racism among some of our fellow citizens. It would seem obvious that to combat this subjective racism, we must, among others, strengthen the capacity of our host, the Human Rights Commission, expeditiously to identify, to expose publicly, and condemn all manifestations of racism, including anti-Semitism. That we should strengthen the legal capacity of the state to act against racism, including its punishment of unacceptable hate language, with the necessary respect for the constitutionally protected freedom of speech. We should ensure that our school curricula, from the lowest grade and the curricula in higher education, inculcate in the young the values of non-racism and non-sexism and the celebration of our common humanity. That we work to ensure to cultivate a common patriotism among all our people, based on recognition of the reality that we share a common destiny, that none can truly succeed without the other, and that we are to one another, as I've said, our brothers and sisters keepers. That we should strive to ensure that all our national institutions and organized formations, both public and private, properly manifests healthy cooperation within a context representative of our demographic diversity. And indeed, we should insist that especially government and the corporate sector do everything possible within their own structures and continuously, such that they serve as exemplars of what it means to have a non-racial society, expressive of the values of true national reconciliation, of non-racialism and non-sexism. It is obvious that the strenuous efforts our country has taken over 2 decades to eradicate the legacy of colonial and apartheid racism, and therefore material racism, have not succeeded as well and as fast as we and the majority of our population expected and hoped for. And the objective truth is that in many of its socio-economic features, our country continues to be characterized by racially and gender-defined poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, social exclusion, and economic disparities. The National Development Plan recognizes its reality as when it says in various paragraphs that despite, and I quote, despite progress since 1994, South African society remains divided. South Africa remains one of the most unequal economies in the world. The privilege attached to race, class, space, and gender has not been fully reversed. For at least the next decade, race should continue to be given the greatest weight in defining historical disadvantage. And when opportunity is skewed for centuries, this tends to produce a distribution of financial, human, and social capital that contributes to reinforce inequality of opportunity, even if the legal elements of discrimination have ended, unquote. It is this reality of material racism which constitutes the principal obstacle to the creation of a non-racial and non-sexist society, which therefore results in the postponement of the realization of the objectives of national reconciliation and nation building. And I'd like to believe that most people will not question the fact that serious and sustained efforts have been made over the last 22 years to transform our country into the non-racial and non-sexist society our Constitution calls for. Similarly, I'm certain that none of us will contest the conclusion that the progress we have made in this regard has not been as speedy and thoroughgoing as the situation demands and as we wish, which is what explains the statement in the National Development Plan that for at least the next decade, race should continue to be given the greatest weight in defining historical disadvantage. It would therefore seem obvious that given the fact that all of us are keenly interested to accelerate progress towards the creation of a truly non-racial and non-sexist society, we must do at least three things. The first of these is that we must carry out a comprehensive and critical assessment of our policies and programs during our years of democracy, to try to discover and determine why we have not made greater and more decisive progress in terms of the eradication of the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, as this bears on the strategic matter of the creation of a non-racial and non-sexist society. The second is that we should then engage the challenging question: what are the genuinely new things we must do? Treating the matter of the continuing pernicious existence of material racism in our country as truly a national emergency, which does not allow for an approach of business as usual. And the third is that we should encourage action on a process which was visualized by the National Planning Commission in the diagnostic report it issued in 2001, rather not 2011, when it said a national dialogue involving all South Africans is required to arrive at solutions that are credible and implementable. Tackling the challenges facing the country, they said, will require the involvement of all sectors of society. I believe, Chairperson of the Commission, that if this important conference to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the South African Human Rights Commission acts to help ensure that our country takes these three vital initiatives, it will make a major contribution to the national task radically to accelerate the process towards achieving the objectives of non-racialism and non-sexism, and therefore national reconciliation and nation building. I'm therefore indeed honored to wish the conference and the Human Rights Commission success, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very, very much.
Well, that was the keynote address delivered there by former State President Thabo Mbeki at the 20th anniversary of the South African Human Rights Commission. That event is taking place in Midrand here in Gauteng. Now, it's 5 minutes before the top of the hour. We'll take a full news bulletin at the top of the hour at 10. But let's deal with our question today. FIFA have, well, suspended 4 South African officials for match fixing. What do you make of the latest match-fixing scandal? Now, we can confirm that former SAFA CEO Leslie Sidibe is one of those people that was suspended. He was also a man who had a news conference yesterday, and he, in that news conference, threatened to spill the beans on all the goings-on within the 2010 World Cup, even mentioning a $10 million payment, of course, that we all know all too well. Anyhow, that's our question of the day. We'd love to hear from you. We'll resume the Newsroom show with a complete news bulletin at the top of the hour at 10 o'clock. Leslie Sidibe, very much the man in the news today. So we'll see you then.
Controlesa is actually stirring the pot here.
I'm sure they've been consulted as Controlesa. They did not see a snake. Now that in certain areas there are certain benefits that might possibly be accruing, there is a snake, now we need to reverse the process.
I agree, but it is not above the sovereignty of the people. The very same court you're talking about.
The sovereignty of the people, probably you should explain that to me.
The sovereignty of the people is above everything.
It is not proper the way facts are presented to the public. Are you in contact with Kgosigolo Motshodi?
He was kicked out by the court because he wanted to be amicus curiae.
For your weekly dose of all things legal, join Dumile Mateza every Sunday at 2 p.m. only on SABC News Channel.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
The act of travel is an eye-opening activity that not only expands your view but is a major part of any country's economy. South Africa's spectacular scenery, friendly people and world-class infrastructure make it one of the most desired destinations in the world. Despite tough global economic conditions, the tourism sector is steadily growing. But the idea that one has to go far in order to explore is quickly changing as the sector encourages local exploration. South Africa's history has been one of confrontation, but is now also known as one of reconciliation. World-class sites have been established to commemorate the country's past and celebrate its newfound unity. An area of tourism that is often overlooked is the question of the arts and tourism. Although many cities have not taken advantage of this element to attract international visitors, the domestic artistic tourism is fast becoming a key drawcard for local exploration. A-grade exhibition centers are creating modern spaces to showcase what makes up the African expression. A good dose of creative capital is playing a major role as entrepreneurs create new and exciting ways to sell their products, thus creating new vibrant local spaces that are changing the face of our communities. South Africa has earmarked tourism as a key sector with excellent potential for growth, and a vast amount is being poured into changing the face of our spaces, making them vibrant, urban and exciting.
It's 10:00 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 15th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News on Channel 404, Jumbo Africa. And a very warm welcome to the second hour as we broadcast live from our Auckland Park studios in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. As you know, we're also streaming live on YouTube, with the entire show now available on our YouTube channel. We ask you a question today. What do you make of the latest match-fixing scandal? You can let us know on our Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom, as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. The situation in the Mandela informal settlement at Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand remains tense but calm following the weekend's chaos. The 60th Commission on the Status of Women is underway in New York under the theme Women's Empowerment and the Link to Sustainable Development. And key U.S. states will vote today in Super Tuesday in the U.S. election primaries. Now, that's all the news, all the headlines that we have for you. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makhamate what's happening on the sports field. Very good morning to you.
Elvis, good morning to you. Quite a lot happening overnight as well as this morning in the world of sports. Good morning to you all. This is what we have happening in sports today.
The support only came in October of 2010 in the form of $10 million.
Former SAFA CEO Leslie Sidibe threatens to spill the beans on the $10 million after he gets a 5-year ban from FIFA.
I think we have to see to very successful commercial companies.
WADA says that sponsors and broadcasters should help fund the fight against doping. And India and New Zealand prepare for their opening World T20 match in Nagpur this afternoon. And that's what we have for you in the sports. And Elvis, is going to be a very big day, in fact, a very big month, I believe. With that question of ours, what do our viewers make of the latest match-fixing scandal that's hit the airwaves?
Well, that's the question, and you can let us know what's on your mind on that Facebook page, as well as the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Kendall will be back a little bit later with more, so you'll have to stay tuned. Top story now this hour. The situation in the Mandela informal settlement at Katlehong on Gauteng's East Rand remains tense but calm. Chaos broke out on Saturday following the killing of a local man, allegedly by a Somali shopkeeper. Among the injured is 14-year-old Bongani Msimango, who was fighting for his life after he was hit by a stray bullet.
Picking up the pieces. Shopkeepers at Mandela informal settlement are trying to get their businesses off the ground after this weekend's violence. This Ethiopian shopkeeper says he's tired of suffering for others' mistakes.
You must do it, they make a plan for Somalian people. You do the wrong every time.
Just down the road, locals equally affected. This woman's property was damaged by looters.
I built these rooms to make extra income, so these shopkeepers only came to rent. Now the looters destroyed everything. What will my children eat?
Some residents aren't happy that the businesses remain closed.
We lack nothing, but today, kids went to school empty-handed. We are asking the community to stop.
Some of the injured bystanders are not doing so well.
When I called to inquire about his health, they said he was critical.
Residents say all they want is peace.
Let them go back home because they are not peaceful. They will finish us.
Police are maintaining a strong presence. There have been sporadic clashes between locals and foreign shop owners in the recent past. Matlako Komane, SABC News, Katlehong, Ekurhuleni.
Speaker of Parliament, Baleka Mbete, says land allocation and a de-racialized economy remain central to tackling the challenges of inequality in the country. Mbete was addressing the South African Human Rights Commission 20-year anniversary conference currently underway in Midrand.
Decade of existence comes at a time when the country has been rocked by racial turmoil. National Assembly Speaker Baleka Mbete says while the scourge of racism is a global problem, institutions like the Human Rights Commission have a critical role to play in calming simmering racial tensions.
Our history and the experiences of other countries show that unity and social cohesion are necessary to meet social and economic objectives.
Mbete says accelerating land reform is the only sustainable solution.
We must insist that our economic growth path de-racializes the economy and makes a fundamental break with ownership patterns of the past. This must also include the acceleration of the allocation of land.
Government has also praised the Commission for its sterling work in defense of ordinary people's human rights.
In addition to the South African Human Rights Commission, we have the Equality Court that serves as a mechanism in which disputes relating to violation of these rights can be ventilated, whilst the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development provides administrative support.
Former President Thabo Mbeki is billed to address the conference's final day on Tuesday. Dumala Mushaudi, SABC News, Midrand.
News just in. The appeal court has dismissed government's Omar al-Bashir's appeal. That appeal court says it was unlawful for government to allow the Sudanese president to leave the country. Government had argued that al-Bashir was afforded diplomatic immunity by the Immunities Act because he's a sitting head of state. The state had appealed the High Court ruling that found government was bound by the Rome Statute and ought to have arrested al-Bashir. Now, we'll have more on this story in our later bulletin, so stay tuned here on your channel of choice, Channel 404. This is Newsroom. The 60th Commission on the Status of Women is underway in New York. The theme for this year's session is Women's Empowerment and the Link to Sustainable Development.
She called the 2030 agenda arguably one of the finest moments for the UN, but argued that targets and goals could fall short if implementation doesn't begin in earnest.
It is that it will take 50 years to achieve parity in political participation and 118 years for true pay equality between men and women at the current pace of change. To break these trajectories and achieve Planet 50-50 by 2030 will take dramatic steps and the adoption of business unusual by all of us.
The Secretary-General warned that as long as women's rights are violated, the struggle for equality would never be over.
Countries in the world where not a single woman is represented in the parliament, and 8 countries in the world without any woman in the cabinet. I'm not going to disclose the names of the countries today, but I'm urging they know who you are. I'll be checking every day until the last day of my mandate as Secretary General.
General Assembly President brought the slow pace of change back to the UN's front door.
Systems continue to pay lip services to gender parity, and governments continue to clamp down on those who defend human rights. And labor laws and practices remain stacked in favor of men, as demonstrated by the fact that even in this organization, the United Nations, we have yet to see a female Secretary General.
South Africa's delegation is headed by Minister in the Presidency responsible for women, Susan Shabangu, and the Minister of Small Business Development, Lindiwe Zulu. Sherwin Briceby's SABC News, New York.
The ANC's 254 branches in the province are to investigate and report those who disrupt party activities. Now, this was one of the resolutions made at the ANC's Northwest Provincial General Council meeting. The meeting was marred by protests from disgruntled members who were locked out of the venue.
The meeting, attended by more than 500 ANC delegates, deliberated on numerous issues, including the upcoming local government elections, but a strong warning to those disrupting ANC activities.
According to the constitution of the ANC, only chairpersons and secretaries are permitted to take part in the General Council, and those who plan violent disruptions were failing out of their constituted list of delegates.
The provincial chairperson also squashed rumors of the possible dissolution of the PEC and his redeployment.
I was with the president. We were in a meeting called Presidential Coordinating Council, where the president meets with other premiers and ministers and SALCA to look at progress we are making in implementing the programs of government. And I was there. So there's nothing closer to the truth about the letter and me having been given an instruction to vacate my position.
Mahoma Pilu denied reports of a rift between the Provincial Executive Council and the National Executive Council. The meeting pledged support for President Jacob Zuma and says it will oppose any efforts to remove him.
Now, recent heavy rains in the country have brought little relief to drought-stricken areas. Now, this according to government update to the stakeholders in the agricultural sector north of Pretoria. The visit to the drought-stricken areas formed part of a follow-up meeting and ongoing stakeholder engagement in Tshwane in the drought intervention programs.
Several small commercial farmers receiving drought relief, with about 400 of them benefiting from the feed.
No doubt that it's getting better, but the consequences are going to stay with us for a long time. But the relief is here, but we're going to take long for the relief to be felt by everybody.
The ongoing drought has had a devastating impact on many farmers and food security.
I lost about quite a few cattle, and I managed through during this difficult time to, get money from a commercial bank and try and feed the animals. But since government's intervention, it came at the right time.
The delegation also conducted oversight visits to some community projects. Chicken farms were also inspected. As part of the drought relief program, Tsele opened a borehole in the area.
We are going to benefit as a community here for drinking water because we've got problem with drinking water also, and then also our animals.
But the Itireleng community group expressed concern, saying government installed a borehole in 2009 in the area, but it never worked.
And even the government, when he finished to give the people the money, he doesn't go after them to look that they are doing their work.
Tsele and his team are visiting 4 drought provinces, Gauteng being the third. Now the focus shifts to the Western Cape, where farmers will receive the same aid next week. Patricia Fasachi, SABC News, Pretoria.
Now, for the latest on the appeal court dismissing government's Omar al-Bashir appeal case, Let's now cross live to our reporter Mbali Sibanyoni in Bloemfontein. A very good morning to you, Mbali, and welcome. And can you tell us more about today's court ruling?
Good morning. Yes, we do know that the Supreme Court of Appeal has dismissed the state's case here over the Omar al-Bashir debacle, and we do know that this relates to the North Gauteng ruling last year, saying that the South African government was obliged to arresting Omar al-Bashir when he was here in June last year. Now the South African government is saying that they are not allowed to arrest a sitting president, and this also relates to them being part of the ICC. ICC says that they were supposed to arrest Omar al-Bashir when he was here last year in June. And we don't know what's going to happen right now. We know that it has been dismissed, that we do know that maybe now it will head on over to the Constitutional Court. It's back to you in studio.
Thank you, Mbali. That's the update on the case there, as you heard from Mbali Sibanyoni, our reporter on the scene in Bloemfontein. Now, the first parliamentary quarter is soon coming to an end. President Jacob Zuma faces questions about the firing of the Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene on Thursday. But until then, members of Parliament have a long to-do list before they leave for the Easter recess.
Opposition MPs want answers to the dismissal of former Finance Minister Nhlanhla Nene and his replacement by David van Rooyen, who only lasted 3 days as the rand fell through the floor. He was then swiftly replaced by Pravin Gordhan. The leaders of the EFF and the DA will lead the third degree.
In this matter of the BRICS Bank, makes no sense. The Minister of Finance did not have to be removed in order to qualify for this position at the BRICS Bank. So we need the President to make a statement in Parliament and tell the truth to the people of South Africa.
We've got the greatest confidence in the President that he will respond to all this. The President respects his accountability to Parliament and is always ready to respond to the question in Parliament.
But there'll be enough action before then. On Tuesday, they'll consider the Chief Justice's report on candidates for the empty Electoral Commission seat. And the next day, the issue of appointing an Inspector General of Intelligence, which demands a 2/3 majority. To push through the ANC favourite Cecil Burgess, the party will need all its votes, including ministers, plus at least 17 opposition converts. And finally, the showdown between the ANC and the DA in the Ethics Committee. The DA is expected to reveal evidence of the committee's alleged bias against its members and announce possible legal action. Lukhanyo Khalada, SABC News, Parliament.
News from further afield now. U.S. Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump continued hunting for votes in 3 states on Monday before a crucial round of nominating contest on Super Tuesday. Trump made appearances in North Carolina, Florida, and Ohio ahead of Tuesday's primaries and has dismissed the outbreaks of violence at his campaign events as a little disruption.
Trump said Republicans who have labored to stop his outsider candidacy needed to recognize his strength and rally to his cause. Ohio, Florida, Illinois, North Carolina, and Missouri will hold nominating contests on Tuesday for the November 8th elections. Trump rejected suggestion his combative campaign tone was to blame for recent clashes at these rallies. His supporters also backed him.
It's a shame. It's a shame that we have to put up with that. That's our First Amendment right to come out and enjoy ourselves and hear what they do. I'm not out there protesting and therefore, so I feel that is a sign of disrespect.
I'm okay with the political process. I love what Trump has done to energize the process, but what's unfortunate is they have their rights, but they cannot squelch the First Amendment or our freedom to hear what we want to hear. Obviously, he's touched a nerve in this country and energized us and a lot of people, so this is the first political event I've ever been to, and it's because I want to come out and show my support against that kind of interference.
In the Democratic race, Hillary Clinton, a former Secretary of State, hopes to pull away from Sanders, a U.S. Senator from Vermont, in Tuesday's voting. Polls gave her a big lead in Florida and North Carolina, but show Sanders gaining ground in Ohio, Illinois, and Missouri.
Ivory Coast President Alassane Ouattara has condemned Sunday's attack by gunmen from Al-Qaeda's North African branch that left 18 dead at an Ivory Coast resort town. Ouattara also declared 3 days of mourning and raised the country's terrorism alert to its highest level.
Sunday's raid was the furthest yet from Al-Qaeda in the militants' Maghreb traditional desert base, a worrying indication of the militants' growing rage. Ouattara says the country will not be intimidated by terrorists.
Avec la plus grande fermeté, ces attaques odieuses.
I strongly condemn these barbaric and coward attacks on innocent people. Dear fellow citizens, Ivory Coast will not allow to be intimidated by terrorists. Yes, Ivory Coast is standing up to fight the cowards and protect its people. We will not let the terrorists slow down our march towards development. On the contrary, these acts strengthen our vision of a united Ivory Coast, which grows in order to improve the daily life of every Ivory Coast citizen.
15 civilians and 3 members of the special forces were killed and 33 people were wounded in the attack in Grand Bassam. Grand Bassam is a weekend retreat popularly with Ivorians and Westerners. 26 wounded people are still receiving medical attention.
Now that's your news for now. Kendall Makhamate standing by with your sports news after the break.
SABC News. We report, contextualize and present news and current affairs honestly, fairly and fully. We consider it a duty to provide consistent, relevant, useful and top quality information and analysis. Our mission is to provide credible, accurate and interesting news programming, bringing news into everyone's homes in everyone's languages. Thank you, South Africa, for relying on SABC News for quality news output and for making us your #1 source of information. SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Good morning, welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamat. I've got your sports on Newsroom. Topping our stories in this sports bulletin is about how the FIFA's Independent Ethics Committee has banned 3 more South Africans from taking part in any football-related activities. Former SAFA's Chief Executive Leslie Sidibe and 2 former head of referees, Adil Karelse and Steve Goddard, have been banned for their involvement in the fixing of international friendlies before the World Cup in 2010.
The 3 former SAFA officials have been banned from all football-related activities at both national and international level. Investigations into the 3 began in November 2014. Sidibe has been banned for 5 years and is also expected to pay a fine of just over 310,000 rand. The former chief executive was found to have infringed Article 13 that deals with the general rules of conduct, Article 15 dealing with loyalty, and Article 18 that deals with disclosure, cooperation and reporting. Former head of referees Adil Karelse and his predecessor Stephen Goddard have each received a ban of 2 years. SAFA has welcomed the sanctions imposed on the former football officials.
Decision by the FIFA Ethics Committee is most welcomed by SAFA. As you know, this matter has been dragging on for many years. When this first came to light in 2012, we reported the matter to FIFA immediately so that there would be an independent investigation in regard to these issues. So once the matter has dragged on and things were not as what we expected it to be.
In October last year, former director of national teams Lindile Kika was banned for 6 years from all football-related activities. Kika was among the SAFA officials asked to take leave of absence in 2012 following a FIFA report into the match-fixing investigation. Referees working for the Singapore-based betting syndicate of Wilson Rajperumal, manipulated the matches in question. They are South Africa's 5-0 win over Guatemala and a 2-1 win over Colombia in May 2010. Sfiso Ramara, SABC News.
Now, former Bafana Bafana Chief Executive Leslie Sidibe has lashed out on his former employers, SAFA, together with FIFA, calling them liars and cowards. Sidibe says he was never allowed an opportunity to clarify FIFA's preliminary investigations and subsequent decision to ban him for 5 years in all football activities. Sidibe has warned the media that the truth will come out about the $10 million so-called donation by FIFA to SAFA.
Raise funds to help the team, including the direct request to FIFA. Just so you know, at that time, because there was no money, I wrote to FIFA requesting funding to say SAFA is technically insolvent. There is no money. And this is in the lead up to the 2010 FIFA World Cup. FIFA told me in no uncertain terms that they would not be able to give me any money. Jerome Valk told me to my face, I will not give you any money. The support only came in October of 2010 in the form of $10 million. You see, the $10 million comes up again. So they gave us $10 million, but only in October. The truth will come out, whether it was a donation or what.
What's your suspicion, Leslie?
No. Let's leave that. There's an FBI investigation. All I can tell you is I travel anywhere in the world. Yes.
Will you cooperate with the FBI?
I travel anywhere in the world, my friend. I've just come back from China on a business trip. There is no, I don't have concerns that other people have about international travel. That's all I can tell you.
Will you cooperate with the FBI?
Yes, I will. I cannot speak for FIFA, but I can assure you I'm not paying that. I'm not going to waste my children's money. I have children who I have a responsibility towards and their future. I will not let them sue me, but I'll give you this one assurance. I will meet FIFA in court.
And you will clear your name?
And I will clear my name. Those cowards, I'll meet them in court. Good. And let me tell you, one thing that I really relish is to have them under cross-examination.
And of course, what we want to do right now is have a quick look at what some of your comments are on this particular matter. Do you believe what Leslie Sidibe is saying or not? And do you believe that he's being hung out to dry or not? Puzi Henesi. Leslie Sidibe has all his ducks in a row. It appears that the FIFA Ethics Committee could be exposed for unethical practices. Go figure. Nothing new there. We all know how FIFA has been dealing over the last few months. Justice for all. Leslie Sidibe can't still be working for Proudly SA if he was involved in bribery that has brought embarrassment to our country. He must go. Interesting comment there. Vaughan ZA says, don't you find it so funny how South Africans are never guilty? No matter how much proof there is, they are never guilty. Leslie Sidibe, hashtag Leslie Sidibe. We also have Kwaswi saying Leslie Sidibe asked a pertinent question. If when I came, SAFA was bankrupt and couldn't pay salaries, why donate $10 million to the Caribbean? Interesting. Yes, lots to unearth in that particular story. And I'm sure that as we go along, we'll get more and more truth and so on coming out of that one. Now, after the thrills and a few spills of the Absa Cape Epic prologue in Merendal yesterday, the riders moved up the road to Tulbagh for today's first stage. As has become the tradition, the stage was a tough one, with the riders ascending 2,300 meters over 108 kilometers. A lot of it on rugged and rocky terrain. The stage was won by the Team Bull pair Karl Platt and Urs Huber.
The Team Bulls pair of Platt and Huber went out hard from the start and led practically from start to finish, along with Cape Epic first-timers Pericles Ilias and Thiago Ferreira. The tactic paid off for Platt and Huber, with the pair claiming victory in a time of 4 hours, 32 minutes and 12 seconds. Ilias and Ferreira of the Dolomiti Superbike team finished third on the day after taking a wrong turn towards the end. This allowed Topik Ergon Racing's Alban Tlakata and Christian Heineck to shoot into second place, 38.5 seconds behind the Team Bulls. Platt and Hubert lead Lakat and Heineke by nearly 3 minutes overall. The first South Africans are Darryl Lill and Waylon Woodcock. The USN Perfect riders are 7th, just more than 11 minutes behind the leaders. And in the women's category, South Africans Robin de Groot and her Swedish teammate Jenny Stennerhag of Team Ascendus Health won their second successive stage after falling nearly 3 minutes behind the Spurs specialised pair of Ariane Kleinhans and Annika Langvat. Kleinhans and Langvat are the defending champions, but Kleinhans struggled in the last 20 kilometres and she and her teammate had to settle for second, 40 seconds adrift.
For the first time in 2016.
Hannes Reineke, SABC News.
Right. The World Anti-Doping Agency has called on sponsors and broadcasters to help fund the fight against drugs in sports. WADA chiefs made the appeal on the first day of its anti-doping symposium in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Over the past year, the sporting world has been rocked by allegations of doping and cheating by high-profile athletes and administrators alike. Because of this, powerhouse Russia's participation at the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro in August is in serious doubt. So is that of Kenya, who has until the 5th of April to prove its compliance to WADA anti-doping regulations. Tennis superstar Maria Sharapova has most recently been identified as one of 99 athletes who've tested positive for meldonium since the 1st of January. It's no wonder then that WADA describes the past year as one of its toughest.
Public's confidence in sport was shattered in 2015 like never before. The public mood has soured, cynicism has prevailed, and there is a general feeling that they're all at it.
WADA's annual budget stands at around $27 million, less than some athletes earn in a year. More money is urgently needed.
Who else is there out there that might be able to protect the integrity of sport by contributing to those who have to monitor it? Yeah. And you might look, I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years, you might look at broadcasting and you might say, can we get 0.2% of the annual broadcast fees that they're giving out to sport?
Apart from addressing doping issues, WADA also promised added protection for whistleblowers.
We at WADA will continue to work hand in hand with both whistleblowers and the media, and we will put in place enhanced measures to protect whistleblowers better. We all want the same thing, after all, and that is clean sport.
Meanwhile, IAAF President Sebastian Coe reiterated his belief that first-time doping cheats should get life bans.
The code is not arcane maritime law. It isn't sort of something we don't really understand. Athletes know that there is a real risk if they step outside the system and cheat. And yes, of course, my natural instinct is to get the cheats out of sport for life.
WADA says its list of banned substances has been published on the 1st of October every year since 2003. There are therefore no excuses for athletes who claim they didn't know, as the fight against cheats in sport steps up yet another gear. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
And the T20 Cricket World Cup starts in earnest today, with the host India opening up proceedings with a match against New Zealand in Nagpur. Let's take a quick look at the fixtures for this week all the way until Sunday. As you can tell, at 4 p.m. Central African time, India take on New Zealand at Jamta Nagpur. And then tomorrow, the 16th of March, the 2 matches. There's that first match, Bangladesh against Pakistan, which you will remember was moved from Dharamsala to Kolkata because of security concerns to the Pakistani team. And then we've got England against the West Indies in Mumbai, the afternoon match. Then on the 17th of March, Afghanistan against Sri Lanka in Kolkata, 4 p.m. And then Dharamsala is where New Zealand and Australia will pit their skills against each other on the 18th of March. And then the 18th of March, later on in the afternoon, we've got England against South Africa. That's the Proteas' first match for this particular T20 World Cup in Wankhede, Mumbai. Eden Gardens, Kolkata is where India and Pakistan play against each other at 4 p.m. That's a massive match, that one. We'll see how that one goes. That is probably the most highly anticipated match for this particular round. 20th of March, Afghanistan against South Africa. Afghanistan, one of the qualifiers, they beat Zimbabwe nowhere to get into this one. And they'll be playing in Mumbai at 11:30 on the 20th of March. And then again on Sunday, same day, in the afternoon, is Sri Lanka against the West Indies in Bangalore. And that's exactly where we leave it for now. With the sports, we'll take a short break. And as you know, Evan Janssen is standing by with more news. Don't go anywhere.
Get all the latest news from the SABC's online news services on our website. Breaking news and in-depth coverage of everything from business, sports to politics and lifestyle. Catch the top news clips and watch live streaming of major news events on the SABC News YouTube channel whenever. Stay connected on the SABC News Facebook page and have your say on news that matters to you. And for the latest headlines and live updates from our reporters, follow us on Twitter. SABC Digital News, anytime, anywhere.
Hello again, you're back with Newsroom here on SABC News. Of course, we've got a story that's developing right now. The Supreme Court of Appeal, the SCA in Bloemfontein, has ruled that government acted unlawfully by allowing Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to leave the country. That was during the AU summit some time ago. Al-Bashir was here to attend the summit in the month of June last year. Earlier, the High Court in Pretoria ruled that South Africa, as a signatory to the Rome Statute, was obliged to arrest al-Bashir and hand him over to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. The South African Litigation Centre had contended that al-Bashir was not immune from arrest and that South Africa was supposed to be committed to bringing war crimes suspects to book. The SCA concurs that the state's failure to arrest al-Bashir was inconsistent with the country's constitution. Now, let's move on to our theme today. According to the United Nations projection for the period between 2015 and 2030, Johannesburg's population will grow from 9.3 million to 11.5 million. In 2013, there were 6.5 million vehicles on Gauteng's roads alone, and that number is fast increasing. Gauteng Premier David Makura spoke at a three-day international conference on the concept of a Transport Authority for the Gauteng City region last week, and he says the introduction of a Transport Authority in the province will enable the integration of all modes of public transport. A little bit earlier today, we were joined in studio by Gauteng's MEC for Roads and Transport, Mr. Ismail Vadi. We apologise for the lack of sound on that clip. Moving on, staying with the theme, as the city develops through urbanisation and construction development, it's important to balance the needs of the growing community through regulation of traffic, energy, as well as water supply. Upgrading old parts of towns is also a great way to invite people back into the city. Now, the Maboneng precinct, which began as a single street in a neglected part of the Johannesburg CBD, is just one of the upgraded spots now used as a local hangout. We were joined by the University of Johannesburg's a lecturer in the Department of Town and Regional Planning, Aurobindo Ogra, and then the key projects manager at Property, Shruti Nair.
We have to understand urbanization is something which the cities have to cope up with, and it has its both pros and cons. Mm-hmm. And if you look at compared with the global south, you will find that the South African cities are very in terms of diverse, in terms of spatial content. On one side, we have the diverse nature in terms of the expansion, and on the other side, we are in terms of 5 times lesser in terms of density. So somewhere we have to balance the density and the diversification in terms of the spatial content. So comparing to the similar population like Johannesburg and Ekurhuleni or Tshwane, if we compare with some of the cities having the similar population in the global south like Surat, Ahmedabad and other places, you'll find that there is a 5 to 6 times difference in terms of expansion. So let's say Johannesburg is spread over roughly around 1,600 square kilometers. You'll find on the other side it's 4 times lesser or 5 times lesser. So that means we are far, far away in terms of reaching the densification, compactness and other things. And it has a number of implications on cost and transformations and in terms of managing the city's service delivery and other areas.
So how will that then impact on the city's expansion rate? Do we have to look at maybe, when you talk about densification in terms of high-rise buildings, or what are we talking about?
Well, high-rise is definitely and as one of the important element in that entire process of planning and other thing. We have to understand that as we expand, the cost of cities is increasing. The cost of providing the capital investment is increasing. The cost of service delivery is increasing. Maintenance is increasing. So definitely looking at the context, what we have right now as an opportunity, densification, high-rise is one of the important things. I would add another element to entire compactness is basically the compactness with a mixed use, optimal use functionality. It's very important for the cities to have. Cities might grow, they might densify, they might expand, but it's very important they become the optimal functional units and complement the surrounding environment cities.
Now, talking about mixed-use environments, let's come to you, Fruity. Now, Maboneng, which began as a single street, we believe, in a neglected Doornfontein, Johannesburg CBD area, that is now turned into a vibrant city space. Tell us more about the project.
So we started in about 2008 with one building, and we've slowly grown, and we're sitting on close to about 2,500 residential people living in Maboneng, and close to about 1,500 residential units. But bearing in mind that there's a mixed-use component, so there's retail, there's office, there's industrial, and there's a sliding scale. So there's low to high end. So you've got retail and apartment spaces that start as little as 1,518 right up to 20,000. So there's a sliding scale of economy. So it's a densely populated mixed-use environment.
Now, this particular space, why did you focus on Maboneng for that matter?
The developer, Jonathan Liepman, bought a building in the area. He always had a passion for urban environments and urban settings as opposed to suburban. And I think that he realized that this side of the Joburg CBD was slightly lost at that stage, and there was an opportunity to buy a batch of buildings in an area, and it organically grew into a neighborhood.
Now, tell us about the journey so far. Has it been successful, or is there more to come?
There is more to come. So we've got, like I said, right now, close to about 1,500 residential units and 2,500 to 3,000 people living in our residential units, and by 2020 we hope to up that to about 5,000 residential units and about 10,000 people living in our portfolio. You've got to understand that in and around Maboneng there are other developers, other people taking interest. So down the road from us there are other developers that aren't linked to us, not perpetuity is what I mean, and they are developing this year, between this and next year, 1,000 new residential units, which means that there'll be another 2,000 people, we can assume, that aren't necessarily part of our community but are by association. I mean, it's one big area.
Aurobindo, let me come back to you. Now, this is a classical example of urbanization, and where people take space in town, in the CBD, which is run down, and revamp them. But there's a number of other key projects to revitalize the CBD. There's also one in Melville. Why is the development of such places very important, not just for the city, but for expansion in a city?
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, one of the important aspects is while we expand on the cities, we have to take into aspect of the declining nature and the sustainability nature of the cities. while we have planned cities for future expansion, we have to keep in mind how do we actually account the continued sustainability of the current core areas. So if you go outskirts of the cities, the land prices may be in terms of one of the factor of expansion or one of the factor of choice, but at the same time it's impacting on the transport, it's impacting on the efficiency and other aspects. So considering the three aspects in terms of, I would say, in terms of 3 M's, one is the distance in terms of M, one is the space in terms of density like meter square or at a micro level, and one is in terms of the volume, which is we call the space context. So we find that the compactness, and we have to basically arrest the declining nature of the city. So there are a lot of complements at a current core CBD area, which brings certain complement in terms of cost effectiveness, in terms of accessibility, in terms of reach and other aspects. It becomes very important to basically focus on how do we attract the investments, how do we refurbish the current core space area.
To the United Nations projections for the period between 2015 and 2030, Johannesburg's population will grow from 9.3 million to 11.5 million. In 2013 alone, there were 6.5 million vehicles on our roads, and that number is increasing fast. Gauteng Premier David Makura spoke at a 3-day international conference on a concept of a transport authority for the Gauteng city region last week, and says that the introduction of a transport authority in the province will enable the integration of all modes of public transport. Now, to tell us more, we're joined in studio by the Gauteng MEC for Roads and Transport, Mr. Ismail Vadi. Mr. Vadi, very good morning to you and welcome.
Morning, Elvis.
Take us through the concept of this single transport authority.
Elvis, if you look at our current transport system, it is highly fragmented and it operates in separate compartments. So the city of Johannesburg, for example, has got Metro Bus and then the Via Vaya. City of Tshwane has got Avieng and the old Tshwane bus service. And then Ekurhuleni is trying to get the Harambee system off the ground. It's a bus rapid transit system. And they've got bus services in Brakpan. At the provincial level, we run 34 bus contracts separately from them. Then we've got Gautrain, run by the provincial administration, and Metro Rail, run by PRASA. So this is a completely fragmented system. There's very little in the way of integration. And I think what the Premier was raising is really the idea of beginning to bring this together. And you need an institutional mechanism for that. And the idea is that we establish a transport authority for that.
Taxi owners have been crying foul for years that they are not part and parcel of these plans. Are they going to be part and parcel of this authority?
Well, from the international conference we had last week, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, 14 speakers from all different parts of the world, experts in the field of transport. All of them have advised us is that we should really bring in the private sector, and that's the private bus operators and the taxi industry. A transport authority cannot work without the involvement of the public transport, the privately owned public transport sector, and that is the taxis and the bus owners.
The current system as it stands, can our system cope? Because there's a lot of urbanization into Johannesburg, and there's an expansion, of course, and many more people are driving cars. Can we cope?
I think the system is under a lot of pressure, and that's why we're working quite hard with the municipalities to build a credible and reliable public transport system. Next month, I will be announcing the expansion of the Gautrain system. It's going to be quite a significant expansion over the next 10 years or so. We have to build the system. We must rely, and we will be relying on the taxi industry and the bus operators. But at the same time, we want to reduce traffic congestion on our roads.
There's been a number of projects, also the bicycle lanes that you've introduced last year sometime, which is supposed to be an alternative to make people more aware and create some space for the vehicles to drive on our roads. Is that working, and will that be part and parcel of the public being involved in this authority as well?
Cycling is a growing mode of, in terms of sport and recreation in Gauteng. There's no doubt about it. We need to shift the culture so that it becomes a form of mobility where people can use it for short-distance commuting. I think there are some examples of it, but we need a culture change. We need a mindset shift in the mindset. And if you really look at Wits University, University of Johannesburg, we are starting a project now to encourage students to begin to cycle to the campuses.
Is it working?
No, I think it's going to take some time. I'm an avid cyclist myself. I think people are concerned about the safety factor. That's really the bottom of the issue. Otherwise, we've got fantastic climate. but people are concerned about safety. But at the end of the day, even pedestrians are getting knocked down, motorists are getting involved in accidents. We don't condone that, but I think we really need to look at non-motorized transport as a form of mobility.
When do you see the Single Transport Authority coming to fruition?
Well, look, we're going to have to work very, very closely with the municipalities. The good thing about last week's conference is that at least at the political level, there's a high level of agreement and understanding. We will have to effect some legal changes to the laws. And I would think in about 2 to 3 years' time, we might be having a functioning transport authority.
And then we're talking about a complete integrated transport system, from rail to...
Well, that's the idea. And the key to that is really to have an electronic ticket, so that if all public modes of transport, if we have a single ticket, the value of that is you can use the ticket to move seamlessly from one mode to the other, but it also gives us very valuable passenger information, where you board, where you disembark, what's your movements, where the demand is. And that information is critical from a planning point of view. So I would think we would build this in blocks. It's not a one-go, movement here. It's building the architecture, getting the projects in place, and then slowly building the whole transport system.
MEC, thank you so much for your time joining us here in studio. That was MEC Ismail Wadi here, Gauteng MEC for Roads and Transport, telling us a little bit more in terms of that authority, the Single Transport Authority that you can look forward to. That's all we have for you for now.
Yeah, that was recorded a little bit earlier, actually, that interview Elvis did with the Transport MEC, Mr. Ismail Wadi. Interesting to note that the Gautrain development is going to be extended quite a bit over the next decade. It'll be interesting to see what that announcement is. I can promise you, right on Newsroom, we're going to keep you updated as to what comes out of the announcement that the Transport MEC will make in the next couple of weeks. Anyhow, let's move on and take a look now at the front pages from around the African continent. We'll start in Zimbabwe this morning, where the Herald reports that the majority of Zimbabweans approve of President Robert Mugabe's leadership, despite the economic challenges faced by the country as a result of economic sanctions imposed by the West, while support and trust for MDC leader Morgan Tsvangirai continues to plummet. And this is according to an international think tank reported in the Herald there this morning. Then in Nigeria, the Vanguard says an Abuja High Court sitting at Jabi has ordered the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission and the Nigerian Army to immediately release Colonel Nicholas Ashinze, a former aide to the erstwhile National Security Advisor, Colonel Sambo Dasuki, who had been in detention since the 23rd of December of last year. Finally, in Swaziland, the Observer reports that Mahlangatani, Member of Parliament Mbalakelwa Ndwandwe, yesterday appealed to Prime Minister Sibusiso Dlamini to reduce the number of police raids in Dakar. Growing communities saying that the spraying of Dakar fields using helicopters be conducted at least after 3 years, not as frequent as was currently done. Very interesting story. We're also spraying Dakar crops here in South Africa. Very interesting development. Some people are claiming that it's affecting the communities living around these areas. Disease, lung disease and others seem to be the order of the day. Interesting development. We'll see what comes out of that. Anyhow, it's shortly before the hour of 11. Let's go to Siet Seminari, who's going to give us a weather update.
Hello there. We're seeing more rainfall towards South Africa, especially over the southeastern part, but also majority of it now moving towards the southern part of Namibia as well as over Botswana. A bit of clear conditions towards the southwest. Sunny conditions are expected for the Western Cape province. So it should be quite a good day for you if you're going to be along the Cape Winelands or the Cape Peninsula to just do all the outdoor activities that you can think of, hiking or cycling, whatever it may be along those parts. But for us, towards the northern parts, you should expect a bit of rain. Also, the morning started off with a bit of fog patches, but later now into the early part of the afternoon, it's going to clear up nicely, and then there'll be a build-up again of some isolated and also a bit of scattered thunder showers towards the northeastern parts. Gaborone in Botswana is reaching a maximum of 27 this afternoon, Pretoria 28. Johannesburg is nice and cool, just around the 25 to 26 degrees. Up in 10 at 36, 29 for everybody in Bloemfontein and Walvis Bay, nice and cool at 21 degrees. Rainy weather for Antananarivo, but also temperatures are expected to remain into the upper 20s along those parts. Some showers are expected over the DRC, moving all the way toward the Central African Republic and along the coastal part. So from Libreville going down towards Luanda, do expect a bit of clouds there. Some thunderstorms will be coming in. Look at the purple patches. Those are indicating stronger chances of rainfall. But much of the east is expected to be a bit more sunnier. So from Kampala out towards Mogadishu and maybe even Addis Ababa, a bit of sunny conditions are expected towards those parts. Yeah, I did mention that. There it is, Juba, 38 degrees. Sunny conditions for Kampala. Kigali reaching a maximum of 29. We're seeing a lot of 29s towards Kampala, Nairobi, and then again those lower 30s for Mombasa as well as over Dar es Salaam. The west is rainy as usual. Temperatures also into the upper 20s, and some lower 30s are expected towards Cameroon, going all the way towards Bangui, reaching a maximum of 35 degrees. Now, Central and Northern Africa is expecting clear conditions, dry weather from Al Jouf right through to Seba, as well as along the Nile. Do expect a bit of clear conditions along the pyramids of Giza, and temperatures towards Damascus also slightly dropping there to the mid-teens, 16 for Damascus, Baghdad at 11. Cool weather towards Tehran as well, and some sunny skies for places such as Seba, a bit of cloudy conditions for Benghazi, but it will remain fairly clear for most parts of the west. Temperatures are expected to be quite hot for the western side. You'll see towards Niamey a build-up of clouds, but it's not going to do much in terms of temperatures. 38 degrees is expected for Niamey, Bamako 39. Nice and hot just along the coastal parts as well. That's it for the weather. Stay tuned. There'll be more later.
Manor produces abstract and symbolic works of art. He called his latest collection Vote with Ink, Not Blood.
Praying for peace, literally, in my own way.
The South African film titled Luister or Listen in Afrikaans tackles issues of race in the country.
I think that the end goal is the reformation of institutional culture, but how we get there is in fact through changing the language policy so that no student is forced to learn in Afrikaans.
It's fashion designers like Julian Poko who are starting to pay more attention to menswear and hope to make a mark in the fashion industry.
So regardless of whether you're African, European, there's certain styles that you like. So if an African man enjoys wearing simple, well-tailored pants, then yes, I guess.
Join Refulo Mula for that 1 hour weekly dose of arts and entertainment news every Friday at 9 p.m. on Trends.
Children represent the future, and ensuring their health and development ought to be a prime concern of all societies. Thousands of children under the age of 5 die every year of mainly preventable causes. HIV and AIDS-related diseases are still a major cause of death in young children, followed by pneumonia and acute diarrhea. Malnutrition is a major contributing factor to child death. 1 in 4 children is stunted, and many are deficient in minerals and minerals essential in preventing disease and disability.
So South Africa is a party to the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, which states that a child has the right to the highest attainable standard of living. Our own constitution confers the right to an environment that's not harmful to his or her health, and for children specifically, it confers the right to adequate nutrition and basic healthcare services. I think that is quite important for people to understand.
Section 28 of the Constitution is devoted to children and outlines their rights.
Although there are efforts to ameliorate their plight, the situation for many children remains dire. As far as child health is concerned, challenges that exist are a lack of education, as well as aspects such as challenges in the healthcare system with regard to finances, infrastructure and resources. Also in South Africa, there's a large amount of inequity. That is a vast distinction between children living in affluence and those in poverty. And this is reflected in the child's state of health.
A study conducted by Human Sciences Research Council reveals that poor health care, low immunization rates, and misguided infant feeding practices also contribute to poor health in pregnant women and children.
During pregnancy, ensure that no drugs are taken, that there's no smoking and no drinking, that parents ensure that they are as informed as possible surrounding child health, that positive habits are practiced in order to ensure that the child's environment is clean and healthy. Then aspects such as immunization and ensuring that the child is taken to a healthcare facility when or if the child becomes ill.
Of great concern are the high death rates of newborn babies. Almost 40% of all under 5 deaths occur in the first 28 days of life, according to UNICEF.
Infant mortality rate, under 5 mortality rate remain high, and maternal health remains a continuing issue. Many children live far away from a healthcare facility, and many children suffer from child hunger and malnutrition, which leads to stunting and impairment of development.
It's important that the society ensures that children's rights are protected, even at a global level. At least 4 of the new Sustainable Development Goals relate to child health.
It's 1100 hours Central Africa time on this Tuesday, the 15th of March 2016. This is Newsroom on SABC News, Channel 404. Jumbo Africa, and a very warm welcome to the final hour as we broadcast live from Auckland Park in Johannesburg, South Africa, to the rest of the African continent. I'm Elvis Preston. I'll be with you until 12 o'clock. And as you know, we're streaming live on YouTube with the entire show available on our YouTube channel. Our question for the day, we're asking you, what do you make of the latest match-fixing scandal? I'd like to know from you on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom as well as on our Facebook page. But first, let's take a look at your news headlines. The Supreme Court of Appeal in Bloemfontein has ruled that government had acted unlawfully by allowing the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir to leave the country. The 60th Commission on the Status of Women is underway in New York under the theme Women's Empowerment and the Link to Sustainable Development. And key U.S. states will vote today in the U.S. elections primaries. Those are all your headlines. But before we get to the news, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front. A very good morning to you.
Good morning, Elvis. It's all been fireworks, as we all know, in boardrooms and in front of press conferences as well. But before I get too far into that, let me also say good morning to our viewers at home. Good morning to you. This is what's coming up in the sports today.
In October of 2010, in the form of $10 million.
Former SAFA CEO Leslie Sidibe threatens to spill the beans on the $10 million after he gets a 5-year ban from FIFA.
We have to see very successful commercial companies.
WADA says that sponsors and broadcasters should help fund the fight against doping. And India and New Zealand prepare for their opening World T20 match in Nagpur this afternoon. That in a nutshell is what we've got for you in the sports. Be sure to stick around for that. It's only 2 minutes past 11. 11:30, we bring it all to you. Back to you, Elvis.
Thank you, Kendall. He will be back a little bit later, so you have to stay tuned. Top story this hour. The Supreme Court of Appeals has dismissed government's appeal against the High Court in Pretoria's ruling that the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir should have been arrested. Earlier, the High Court ruled that South Africa, as a signatory to the Rome Statute, was obliged to arrest al-Bashir and hand him over to the International Criminal Court in The Hague. The Supreme Court has ruled that it was unlawful for government to allow the President al-Bashir to leave the country after the High Court ruled that he should not have been allowed to leave. Bashir was in the country last June attending the African Union Heads of State Summit. Government had argued before the court that Bashir was given immunity to travel to attend the summit. Bashir is wanted for crimes against humanity by the International Criminal Court for war crimes committed in Darfur, where more than 300,000 people were killed.
The conduct of the respondents in failing to take steps to arrest and detain for surrender to the International Criminal Court the President of Sudan, Omar Hassan Ahmad al-Bashir, after his arrival in South Africa on the 13th of June 2015 to attend the 25th Assembly of the African Union was inconsistent with South Africa's obligations in terms of the Rome Statute and Section 10 of the implementation of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court Act 27 of 2002 and unlawful. 2. The applicant is entitled to the costs of the application on a pro bono basis. The appeal is otherwise dismissed. 6. The applicants are to pay the respondents' costs of appeal and the costs of the Helen Suzman Foundation, including the costs of its application for admission as an amicus, such costs to include in both instances the costs consequent on the employment of two counsel. I hand the judgment down.
Well, there you have it. The Supreme Court of Appeals has dismissed government's appeal against the High Court in Pretoria's ruling that the Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir should have been arrested last year. Now, for the latest on this, we now cross live to our reporter Jack Parrock, who's in Brussels in Belgium. Jack, a very good morning to you and welcome. And can you tell us, with the Supreme Court of Appeal now in South Africa having dismissed the al-Bashir case, what does this mean for the ICC?
Well, it's a very, very interesting ruling from the Supreme Court in South Africa. And what it means is that the ICC will now feel more justified in their pursuance of the South African government for an explanation in what happened. As soon as al-Bashir was in South Africa for this AU summit, the ICC prosecutor said that the South African government was obliged and must arrest the Sudanese president and transfer him to The Hague under their obligations under the Rome Statute, which is the statute that founds the International Criminal Court, of which South Africa was a founding member. And in fact, the Rome Statute, parts of it are actually enshrined into South African law itself without just the international obligations. So the ICC was very, very keen, very quickly, that once Omar al-Bashir was allowed to leave South Africa after the AU summit, that they wanted to start a proceeding in requesting information about why the South African government had chosen not to do that. That proceeding is still ongoing. The judges at the ICC are still looking into this. But it's essentially been on hold for a short while this was going through the South African courts. So now the ICC will pursue their investigations probably more fervently against the South African government and ask for a direct explanation on why they didn't hand over the Sudanese president.
Now, a lot of firepower now handed to the ICC, so to speak. When can we then expect information from the ICC on the matter?
Well, this is going through the chambers of the court, and it can be timings can be very difficult to judge. But I would expect that the court will come out with something in the next week or so. At the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court, which is the kind of body which all the member countries go to annually to discuss the proceedings of the court every year in The Hague. Back in November, we heard the International Relations Minister of South Africa, Maite Nkwana Mashabane, stand up and give a very scathing speech to that body. We also heard the Justice Minister as well be incredibly critical of the ICC. So it's going to be an interesting kind of friction between the South African government and their ministers and the International Criminal Court after the kind of hard rhetoric they spoke out against the International Criminal Court. But the ICC essentially just wants this explanation to come. They want to know why South Africa didn't arrest the Sudanese president. He's been indicted twice by the court for his alleged crimes in Darfur, which killed around 300,000 people, essentially. So they are looking to really just get Omar al-Bashir arrested and transferred there, and they want to know why South Africa didn't aid them in that. We'll have to wait and see. This could cause some quite tense moments between South Africa and the court. The African Union has been incredibly critical of the ICC and called for a Pan-African withdrawal of signatories from the Rome Statute.
Now, we can probably expect a lot more from that, but what are the other possible implications of this ruling, not just for South Africa, but also on the ICC as a whole?
Well, internally in South Africa, obviously, it's difficult for the government politically, but as far as it goes with the ICC, if the ICC judges decide that South Africa didn't fulfil their obligations under the Rome Statute, really there's not so much they can do apart from kind of a hand slap and a condemnation from the other countries. Really where this can affect is at the United Nations. The United Nations Security Council and South Africa's aspirations to become more influential there could be hampered by this non-compliance, is what the ICC sees it as, in not handing over the Sudanese president. But how it all plays out, we'll have to wait and see what happens when the court looks into what South Africa essentially did and their explanations on what happened.
Now, I know it's a little bit far-fetched, but maybe to speculate, what are some of the sanctions that South Africa can face by the ICC?
The ICC essentially has no power to sanction the South African government. But as I said, it would be the United Nations that could take a hard line. I don't think we would expect any sanctions on a matter of this nature. I think that might be too far-fetched potentially to go. But with regards to kind of power and negotiating power on other issues, that's where it could affect South Africa in the UN in New York. So it will be probably a difficult political position. Probably, actually, this ruling today from the Supreme Court in South Africa is much more difficult for the government domestically rather than internationally. Really now what we see is what the International Criminal Court says in their response and what the judges decide as far as South Africa's alleged non-compliance in not handing over the Sudanese president.
And then just finally, Jack, can you give us an update on what's currently happening at the ICC today?
Today there is the ongoing Bemba trial. Next Monday, actually, we're seeing the judgment in that trial, the former vice president in the transitional government of the DRC, who's alleged to have mass crimes in the Central African Republic. So that's a big judgment to come out. The International Criminal Court has only had 2 convictions in its decade-long history. So the ICC prosecutor, Fatou Bensouda, is really looking for another conviction to the ICC's name.
Jack, thank you so much for that update. That was our reporter in London, Jack Parrock. In fact, he is at the ICC giving us that latest update there. Now, former President Thabo Mbeki says efforts have been made in the last 20 years to transform South Africa to a non-racial, non-sexist society. Mbeki was addressing the South African Human Rights Commission's Racism Conference in Midrand.
It is this reality of material racism which constitutes the principal obstacle to the creation of a non-racial and non-sexist society, which therefore results in the postponement of the realization of the objectives of national reconciliation and nation building. And I'd like to believe that most people will not question the fact that serious and sustained efforts have been made over the last 22 years to transform our country into the non-racial and non-sexist society our Constitution calls for. Similarly, I'm certain that none of us will contest the conclusion that the progress we have made in this regard has not been as speedy and thoroughgoing as the situation demands and as we wish, which is what explains the statement in the National Development Plan that for at least the next decade, race should continue to be given the greatest weight in defining historical disadvantage. It would therefore seem obvious that given the fact that all of us are keenly interested to accelerate progress towards the creation of a truly non-racial and non-sexist society, we must do at least three things. The first of these is that we must carry out a comprehensive and critical assessment of our policies and programs during our years of democracy, to try to discover and determine why we have not made greater and more decisive progress in terms of the eradication of the legacy of colonialism and apartheid, as this bears on the strategic matter of the creation of a non-racial and non-sexist society.
The 60th Commission on the Status of Women is underway in New York. The theme for this year's session is Women's Empowerment and the Link to Sustainable Development.
She called the 2030 agenda arguably one of the finest moments for the UN, but argued that targets and goals could fall short if implementation doesn't begin in earnest.
It is that it will take 50 years to achieve parity in political participation and 118 years for true pay equality between men and women at the current pace of change. To break these trajectories and achieve Planet 50-50 by 2030 will take dramatic steps and the adoption of business unusual by all of us.
The Secretary-General warned that as long as women's rights are violated, the struggle for equality would never be over.
4 countries in the world where not a single woman is represented in the parliament, and 8 countries in the world without any woman in the cabinet. I'm not going to disclose the names of the countries today, but I'm urging they know who you are. I'll be checking every day until the last day of my mandate as Secretary General.
General Assembly President brought the slow pace of change back to the UN's front door.
Political systems continue to pay lip services to gender parity, and governments continue to clamp down on those who defend human rights. And labor laws and practices remain stacked in favor of men, as demonstrated by the fact that even in this organization, the United Nations, we have yet to see a female Secretary General.
South Africa's delegation is headed by Minister in the Presidency responsible for women, Susan Shabangu, and the Minister of Small Business Development, Lindiwe Zulu. Sherman Briceby's SABC News, New York.
Now that's your news for now. Eben Janssen is standing by after the break with your regional news. Stay tuned.
Technology isn't all scary. There's also fun stuff like gaming.
Lots of women do play games, whether it's on their phones or their tablets.
Then there are Africans who are using new tools to make other people's lives much easier.
We typed the whole CV on a small, QWERTY Nokia phone.
For all these and other technology and social media news, join me, Spumelele Zondi, every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time on SABC News.
Hello again, you're still at Newsroom here on SABC News. Now, before we go into our regional update, let's just get the latest on the al-Bashir ruling. We are now joined on the line by Mthunzi Maga, Department of Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson. Very good morning to you, Mthunzi, and thank you for taking the call.
Good morning, and good morning to your viewers.
Just give us a quick response to the SCA ruling dismissing government's appeal against High Court in Pretoria's ruling that President al-Bashir should have been arrested in June of last year.
Look, naturally, we are disappointed because we believed that the Immunities Act had covered him against any arrest as a sitting foreign head of state who was visiting the country not as a guest of the South African government but as a delegate of the AU summit. And it would have been unprecedented for us to effect that warrant of arrest. But obviously the judges differ with us. We have not had an opportunity to study the judgment. We will reflect on all the issues that are raised therein to make a determination if the matter should be escalated, if there are valid grounds, of course, to the Constitutional Court.
What next? Where do you take this from here?
Now, just after the reflection of all the issues that have been raised, we will make that determination whether to escalate to the Constitutional Court or not, because it's the final arbiter on matters of this nature, because we need to zoom in on whether there are any constitutional issues that we need to raise with the Constitutional Court. That's the only outstanding or legal avenue to explore once the SCA has pronounced on the matter.
Mthunzi, thank you very much for giving us a response and an update and for joining us live here in studio this morning. That's, of course, Mthunzi Maga. He's the Department of Justice and Correctional Services spokesperson, talking about that ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal, of course, on President Omar al-Bashir's visit to South Africa. That happened in June of last year at the AU summit, if you can remember. But let's move on to our regional update now. This is where we give you all the latest news from around the regions here in South Africa. Now, I can tell you that Port Elizabeth will host National Wool Week at the end of this month. Wool Week comes at a time when the industry is at a new growth stage with the creation of more than 12,000 new job opportunities. 5 million more sheep are to be absorbed on the ground with the addition of over 1 million hectares of arable land available. Since 2000, that's the year 2000, the rand value of merino wool has increased more than 600%. The drought, however, being experienced in South Africa right now is providing unique challenges to the industry. The week will include retail, fashion, design and agriculture in order for the public to have a better understanding of the value chain within the wool industry. Now, I'm joined from our Port Elizabeth studios this morning by Louis de Beer, who's the CEO of Cape Wools. A very good morning to you, Louis. Thanks for joining us today.
Good morning, Evan, and thank you very much for the opportunity.
Louis, just give us a quick overview about of National Wool Week at the end of the month. What's the expectation?
Look, National Wool Week forms part of the Campaign for Wool, which is an international campaign within which all the largest wool-growing nations invested in. And it's also has Prince Charles as the patron of the campaign. And our expectation is that the public of Port Elizabeth and of the surrounding area will come and visit our exhibition and come to understand wool and the wool industry, and just generally come and have a good time with us. The intention of all of this is obviously to promote wool and to promote the wool industry both nationally and globally.
Louis, the outlook for the wool industry is quite good considering where all developing economies find themselves now. 5 million more sheep, 12,000 new job opportunities. That's great news.
Yeah, but you know, those are big numbers. But we've had a look at it. The board of Cape Wools considered this very carefully and decided that this is the opportunity which is available to agriculture and to South Africa. There's a global gap in the demand. The demand for wool is growing. As the population of the world increases, people demand more wool. Unfortunately, the supply of wool is not growing at the same level, and this gap has come about. So we are saying yes, there's a gap for 25 million kilograms of wool, and why shouldn't South Africa or any of our partners in assistance with South Africa fill that gap? And within that gap, these opportunities arise. So 12,500 job opportunities That's a reality, because if you put down 5 million sheep on 1.25 million hectares, then that's what happens. You create jobs. And this is all funded and supported through a very favorable market for both wool and meat.
The drought. Now, agriculture is suffering because of the drought. We're at the back end. We've had some good rains around the country. But tell us the effect that the drought has had on the wool industry.
Yeah, but there's no doubt that drought has an effect primarily on the morale of the producer that actually has to function within those conditions. The wool industry is fortunate that wool can actually use suboptimal production areas to produce, because the sheep can actually function in those areas and can still produce favorably. So yes, it does have an effect on wool, but I think less so than it would have on grain, for example.
And what are some of the other unique challenges that the industry is faced with right now?
Look, I think we're in a growth phase. It's really going very well with the industry. We're producing our 50 million kilograms per year. We're selling it successfully. We have wonderful opportunities within the industry. And the challenges, I think, are to still remain focused, to continue focusing on the quality of our wool, making sure that it gets out there and that the positive reputation of South Africa within the international arena is kept up. I think we just have wonderful conditions in the wool industry at the moment. So challenges maybe a little bit less, but opportunities, a lot of them, yeah.
What about let's go back to the National Wool Week, which comes at the end of the month. What are you doing differently this year, and what should people be on the lookout for?
Look, I think the big difference in this Wool Week is that we try and combine retail with agriculture. And we're very fortunate to have partnered with Warmer Shopping Centre in Port Elizabeth, as well as the DF Malherbe School, which is right next door to Warmer. And this gives us an opportunity to bring sheep to the public, which the public don't really experience. I mean, there are very few city slickers that get out there and see the reality of agriculture, up front. So I think that's our biggest draw card, and we're very excited about having the sheep present, having shearing displays done by the National Wool Growers of South Africa's very competent shearing team. And then on top of that, we're also having sheepdog shepherding displays, which is something that people very rarely see, especially in a city environment. And that all happens next to a retail environment where we have a fashion, design, and interiors display of the uses of wool. So we're very happy with the format, and we're very excited about it. Look, it's a first for Port Elizabeth, so it's a challenge, but we have no doubt that we'll have the support of the Port Elizabeth community.
Louis, thank you for joining us. That's Louis de Beer, the CEO of Cape Wools. We're talking about National Wool Week at the end of the month in Port Elizabeth. Should be very, very, very interesting, actually. This at the moment, of course, we're looking at regional news, but we've got a breaking news story, something that's a very interesting development for, I think, the agriculture sector here in South Africa. US President Barack Obama has formally reinstated South Africa's duty-free access to the US market under the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, thus ending a long ongoing saga. In November of last year, Obama provisionally suspended South Africa's duty-free access to the US market under AGOA for citrus and wine because the South African government was continuing to block imports of US chicken, beef and pork on health grounds. Now, on January 11, Obama extended the provisional suspension until March the 15th. In the meantime, officials from both governments resolved all the outstanding problems regarding the US meat imports, and the first consignments of chicken arrived in South Africa earlier this month. Now, on Monday, that's yesterday, a day before the deadline, Obama issued a new proclamation in which he said that based on the actions taken by the South African government, he was revoking his January 11 proclamation. This decision restores South Africa's full AGOA benefits and formally closes a difficult chapter in US-South African relations. The negotiations over the issue had dragged on for many months. Well, that's good news. Now, of course, our focus here today was rapid urbanization, and earlier today we spoke with several experts about rapid urbanization set to take place in Johannesburg and Cape Town, rather, due to major construction projects currently underway. According to the United Nations Habitat Report, Johannesburg and Cape Town are two of the fastest growing cities in the world. It's estimated that by the year 2030, Gauteng will be home to around 18 million people. Although this outlook has a positive impact on the economy, it also poses a threat to the population. We spoke to the Communication Deputy Director of the City of Johannesburg, Ntantisi Moringwane, about this a little bit earlier.
Currently, we receiving more than 10,000 people a month coming to Johannesburg, maybe for opportunities and so forth. So as a city, we have to plan accordingly and plan to be able to accommodate those numbers. One of the things that we are working on, that the mayor announced in 2013, is what we call the Corridors of Freedom. The Corridors of Freedom are a development, infrastructure development program that looks at making sure that we increase the densities, because currently, as we speak, the densities in Johannesburg are not in the level of the other cities in the world. You find that people stay in peripheries, far away from places of work, on the outskirts of the city. And what does that do to the poor of the poor? They spend more of their money on food and transport. Going to work. So the approach of the corridors is really to say, instead of going the old route of one person, one stand, maybe 1 point something hectares of stand, why don't we look at those portions of land and go higher in terms of high-rise building? But what we're doing now, we've just rolled out extensive infrastructure to be able to cope with those pressures, the pressures of more people coming into our cities.
What are the threats? What are the negatives of this? We see it in Cape Town as well, and here we see pictures of the building work. Both cities kind of look like building sites. And if you can kind of give us the threats, sort of on the population side, are there increased risks of communities being at odds with each other? We see xenophobic attacks and all that sort of. Is this part of the urbanization process that you have to manage?
Now, from the city of Johannesburg, we take it from the side of positives. Although there might be challenges in terms of making sure that you have enough resources in terms of budget to be able to cater for increasing number of people. But we also view some of the people that are coming into the city being people who are bringing new skills. One of the challenges in Johannesburg is a huge unemployment, especially among young people. What we want to encourage is partnerships with people that have different skills from other countries, from other provinces, to come through and be able to work with people of Johannesburg and be able to stimulate this economy. Because one of the programs that we rolled out as the city of Johannesburg is what we call Josie at Work, where we're saying we do not believe that the current way of delivering services where government comes into your community, deliver service and leave, is sustainable. But we want to partner with communities in those areas so that they work on the service delivery aspect on behalf of the municipality, and the municipality will be compensating them. That way we create smaller businesses and co-ops that are community-based.
Johannesburg in the year 2030, what will that city look like?
The Joburg 2040 strategy that was adopted by Council in 2011 says we're looking at a city that would be vibrant, a city that would be safe, the city that would encourage high density, and the city that would have all the amenities that the community require closer to them. So along these corridors that I spoke about, we're building amenities such as clinics, schools, parks, so that people can live as communities. And one of the things that we also rolling out is this thing of making sure that we re-engineer the way the hostels were designed. Because if a hostel is sitting in a particular area, it looks isolated. It's not part of that community. So we're building family units so that people can be integrated, and we're moving people around so that it's not only the traditional people that were in hostels, but people from townships as well can own a flat in a previously hostel designed area, so that communities don't look at themselves in a tribalistic way or in any other way, but they look themselves as communities that are residing in a particular area.
Integrated communities you're talking about. It's a great vision that you have, but achieving it will be quite difficult. How do you bridge this gap between communities that we seem to have right now?
The most important thing from our side is to engage the communities at all times. When we drafted the Joburg 2040 strategy, it was an extensive public consultation exercise. And one of the things, the outcome of the GDS 2040 is that we have to have what we call engaged citizenry. So for every development, every intervention that goes into a particular communities are brought along. We talk to them, we explain the rationale, we explain the vision, the future, and then the communities that we've engaged with seem to be adopting this approach that says we are all people of Johannesburg, and together we can be able to make a greater city.
As stories are broken around the world, SABC makes sure you do not miss out. As the stories unfold throughout the day, News at 8 updates all newsworthy stories worldwide. Globally, we are there. Locally, we leave no story untold. Make a date with News at 8 every Saturday and Sunday on SABC News, Africa's news leader.
Welcome back. I'm Kendall Makhamati, and I've got your news on sports news, on Newsroom. Now, the top of our stories is the World Anti-Doping Agency has called on sponsors and broadcasters to help fund the fight against drugs in sport. WADA chiefs made the appeal on the first day of its anti-doping symposium in Lausanne, Switzerland.
Over the past year, the sporting world has been rocked by allegations of doping and cheating by high-profile athletes and administrators alike. Because of this, powerhouse Russia's participation at the Olympic Games in Rio de Janeiro in August is in serious doubt. So is that of Kenya, who has until the 5th of April to prove its compliance to WADA anti-doping regulations. Tennis superstar Maria Sharapova has most recently been identified as one of 99 athletes who've tested positive for meldonium since the 1st of January. It's no wonder then that WADA describes the past year as one of its toughest.
Public's confidence in sport was shattered in 2015 like never before. The public mood has soured, cynicism has prevailed, and there is a general feeling that they're all at it.
WADA's annual budget stands at around $27 million, less than some athletes earn in a year. More money is urgently needed.
Who else is there out there that might be able to protect the integrity of sport by contributing to those who have to monitor it? And you might look I've been saying this for 4 or 5 years. You might look at broadcasting and you might say, can we get 0.2% of the annual broadcast fees that they're giving out to sport?
Apart from addressing doping issues, WADA also promised added protection for whistleblowers.
We at WADA will continue to work hand in hand with both whistleblowers and the media, and we will put in place enhanced measures to protect whistleblowers better. We all want the same thing, after all, and that is clean sport.
Meanwhile, IAAF President Sebastian Coe reiterated his belief that first-time doping cheats should get life bans.
The code is not arcane maritime law. It isn't sort of something we don't really understand. Athletes know that there is a real risk if they step outside the system and cheat. And yes, of course, my natural instinct is to get the cheats out of sport for life.
WADA says its list of banned substances has been published on the 1st of October every year since 2003. There are therefore no excuses for athletes who claim they didn't know, as the fight against cheats in sport steps up yet another gear. Liesel Zankel, SABC News.
Now to the other story that's been trending over the last 24 hours or so is that former Bafana Bafana and national soccer team Chief Executive Leslie Sidibe has lashed out at his former employers, SAFA, together with FIFA, calling them liars and cowards. Sidibe says he was never allowed an opportunity to clarify FIFA's preliminary investigations and then subsequent decision to ban him for 5 years in all football activities. Sidibe has warned the media that the truth will come out about the $10 million so-called donation by FIFA to SAFA.
Despite my efforts to raise funds to help the team, including the direct request to FIFA, just so you know, at that time, because there was no money, I wrote to FIFA requesting funding to say SAFA is technically insolvent. There is no money. And this is in the lead up to the 2010 FIFA World Cup. FIFA told me in no uncertain terms that they would not be able to give me any money. Jerome Valk told me to my face, I will not give you any money. The support only came in October of 2010 in the form of $10 million. You see, the $10 million comes up again. So they gave us $10 million, but only in October. The truth will come out, whether it was a donation or what. What's your suspicion, Leslie? No. Let's leave that. There's an FBI investigation. All I can tell you is I travel anywhere in the world. Yes. Will you cooperate with the FBI? I travel anywhere in the world, my friend. I've just come back from China on a business trip. There is no, I don't have concerns that other people have about international travel. That's all I can tell you. Will you cooperate with the FBI? Yes, I will. I cannot speak for FIFA, but I can assure you I'm not paying that. I'm not going to waste my children's money. I have children who I have a responsibility towards and their future. I will not let them sue me, but I'll give you this one assurance. I will meet FIFA in court. And you will clear your name? And I will clear my name. Those cowards, I'll meet them in court. Good. And let me tell you, one thing that I really relish is to have them under cross-examination.
I'll tell you what, we're going to stay on top of that story as well as all the others that we've been staying close to over the months. Now, India batsman Virat Kohli says that the team are confident of winning the ICC World T20 title ahead of this afternoon's tournament opener against New Zealand. Inaugural champions India go into the 6th edition of the tournament as the top-ranked team in the world, having won 10 of the 11 T20 matches this year. Kohli, the world's second-ranked T20 batsman and Indian Test team captain, said the recent Asia Cup triumph in Bangladesh was a good morale booster for the team.
We are pretty confident with the way we've been playing. We've won 10 out of our last 11 games and we're taking some good momentum into the World Cup. The Asia Cup was a good preparation for us for a big tournament, getting the feel of playing against the big teams.
Kohli said that India would focus on backing their strengths rather than thinking about the opposition.
It's going to be tough, but we would like to focus on our strengths. The oppositions do not matter for us so much at this stage. Obviously, we need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the opposition players, but It's more to do with the way we have played and continue the same way, and probably try to execute the same things that we have done, which has got us success.
New Zealand captain Kane Williamson said his team are aware of the threat Indian bowlers could pose on the spin-friendly Nagpur wicket.
We're certainly expecting spin to play a big part in this tournament. I suppose judging by the warm-up games in Mumbai, they perhaps suited seamers and it swung a little bit. It was a very good surface, but from the cricket we've seen here at Nagpur, the spin looks like it'll play a big part. It's important that we adjust our game plans accordingly.
Host India will play their opening match against New Zealand, who they've never beaten in 4 previous meetings, at 4 p.m. Central African time today at the Vidarbha Cricket Stadium in Nagpur. India and New Zealand are pooled with Australia, Pakistan and Bangladesh in Group 2. Now, with that said, let's take a quick look at the fixtures for this week all the way until Sunday. First match, as you just heard, is India against New Zealand in Nagpur, 4 p.m. Central African time. It sets off. Then tomorrow, the 16th of March, 2 matches, one at 11:30, one at 4. First one with Bangladesh against Pakistan in Kolkata, and then England against the West Indies in Mumbai at 4 p.m. Then 17th of March, a single match, Afghanistan against Sri Lanka, and they are playing in Eden Gardens and Kolkata at 4 p.m. We've got Australia against New Zealand in Dharamsala on the 18th of March at 11:30 a.m. And then, same afternoon, we've got England against South Africa. That's the Proteas' first match for this particular T20 World Cup in Wankhede, Mumbai at 4 p.m. 4 p.m. the next day in Kolkata again, probably the most highly anticipated match for the T20 World Cup, or at least in this first round, is India against Pakistan in Eden Gardens in Kolkata. And then on the 20th of March, that's the end of the week, that's Afghanistan against South Africa in Wankhede, Mumbai, and then Sri Lanka against the West Indies in Bangalore. Bring up the rest of the matches for this week. Obviously, on Monday morning, we'll bring you the rest of the fixtures for that upcoming week. Moving on to other sporting news, South African super puncher Zolani Tete made an explosive return to the Liverpool Echo Arena by claiming a 7th round stoppage against Mexico's Jose Santos Gonzalez. With this victory, he became the new IBF International Bantamweight Champion. Now, Lars Bourne, as he's known to his fans, worked hard to impress the Scouse crowd, dictating the pace of the fight from the first round. The polite and softly spoken bantamweight looked a completely different person in the ring, toying with a Mexican at will. Now, the former IBF World Super Flyweight Champion looked in spiteful form as he landed several big hooks on his opponent. Tete from Danzane in the Eastern Cape lived up to his explosive reputation by dropping Sanchez in the second round. Gonzalez looked hurt but was able to beat the referee's count and return to the action. Touted as one of the best boxers to come out of Africa in recent years, Tete justified the hype by delivering a near punch-perfect performance for his Liverpoolian fans. The clinical southpaw landed several precise shots on Gonzalez, who struggled to deal with the African's speed and his movement. The fight was finally won in the 7th after Gonzalez was dropped for a second time. The tough Mexican beat the referee's count but was caught by another big shot, which ultimately ended the bout. Gutsy Mexican Gonzalez was in no state to continue, and the referee ended the contest. And there's a single PSL match on tonight, that between Kaizer Chiefs and relegation-threatened Jomo Cosmos. Now, this particular match, as some people will know, Chiefs will be trying to win this one. They've had 3 losses on the trot. Jomo Cosmos will be trying to win this one. They've just joined the relegation zone. The kickoff at 7:30 p.m. is at FNB Stadium, and everybody knows that some Kaizer Chiefs fans are trying to see if they can get a petition on the go to hand over to Chiefs management on the 23rd of March. But it all remains to be seen whether Steve Kompella and his Chargers will be able to turn their fortunes around and do what Pirates did to Cosmos over the weekend and maybe beat them. That's where we're going to leave it with the sport. We'll take a quick look at the weather, and then we'll carry on with the rest of the show.
Well, that's all we have for you today on Newsroom. We hope that you enjoyed it as much as we did, Kendall.
Absolutely.
And, of course, a very important question that we posed today, you know, what people make of the scandals.
The match-fixing scandals that we've been beset by over the last few months. It's quite scary how our sport has changed over the last decade or so.
We'll keep tabs on that particular story as it unfolds, and we'll keep you posted so you don't want to miss it. Stay tuned to your favorite channel of choice, Channel 404. This is Newsroom. From myself, Elvis Preslin.
And me, Kendall Makamate.
We'll see you bright and early, same time, same place tomorrow morning, right here on the Newsroom. Ciao for now. Arrivederci.